The Sports Renegades podcast on SportsTownChicago.com. All right. Welcome into the Sports Renegades here on SportsTownChicago.com. I'm Ryan Stuprich.
And I'm Ryan Risky.
We got a big show tonight, that's for sure. We're talking all about the Cubs as they clinched the NL Central last night, back-to-back clinches for the Cubs in that capacity. And then we're also going to be talking about the Bears. We'll do a little Bears pregame going into the game at Green Bay for tonight. The Color Rush game, they're going to be decked out in all navy blue, I guess, and the Packers will be all green, I guess. So
lovely.
That should be fun. It should also be fun to see Aaron Rodgers completely destroy the Bears, but we'll talk about that later. I think he's 5-1 on Thursday night games against the Bears, something like that. I saw something. It doesn't surprise me. The one loss, or maybe that's just on
primetime against the Bears.
It must be primetime. The one loss was the game where he got knocked out, and
Josh McCown won.
Yes, exactly. So
that might be at Lambeau. The night games at Lambeau, because the Bears did beat them at Soldier Field for a primetime game way back when the Bears actually won the division.
Yes, they did, and so it's going to be interesting. So we'll talk about all that a little later on. But yeah, let's talk about the Cubs right now as they clinched the NL Central last night in St. Louis, which is pretty cool. It was a good performance from John Lackey, and that begs the question, one, does he make the postseason roster as a starter? Which the answer is probably no. And two, does he make it in the bullpen? Because it still seems like it's undecided.
Yeah, I think he will. He's been pitching better of late, and he also has experience pitching in big games. And he's really been very good in the second half. I feel like Cubs fans are overreacting every time he gives up a run now, like they're acting like it's the end of the world.
Right. Yeah, it seems like that's what people are doing. I don't know. I just feel like, he's pitched well coming down the stretch. He's pitched well in the second half. But, yeah, it seems like every time he gives up a run, I think you're right. People start freaking out over it. So I don't really know. I wouldn't put him in the rotation.
I don't see a scenario where you could put him in the rotation because you've already got Hendricks, Arrieta, Lester, and Quintana.
Yeah, and with those players, Quintana, he pitched probably the game of the year for a Cubs pitcher.
As I said, it was a good tune-up start for him to get ready for the playoffs.
Absolutely.
And he's going to be making his first career postseason start, most likely.
I know. And
unless the Cubs get swept and he's pitching in Game 4, then he'll be making his first career postseason start.
Yeah, and that worries me maybe just a little bit, just because he hasn't had any postseason experience, but shouldn't be anything to worry about. And Arrieta, it seems like he's not 100%. It shouldn't be a concern. He's obviously going to be there. But, he didn't have a good outing on Monday. So
he said he's had to adjust his rotation a little bit, or like his mechanics, because the hamstring is not 100%. And it is a little worrisome, except we'll see what happens. He has experience pitching in these big games, and there's no reason to believe that he won't be able to do it again.
Right. So if you were making your so let's say you're Joe Madden, if you're making the rotation for the first game and going on down, who do you have in Game 1 in Washington D.C.?
I've been seeing a lot of people commenting what they think the Cubs should do in the postseason, in regards to the rotation. And what I'm going to say is I have not seen very much of this. I would go. And you also have to remember, your Game 1 starter is also your guy that's going in Game 5, both of which will be road games. And there's no pitcher on the roster that I feel better about with the season on the line in a potential Game 5 than Jake Arrieta. If I'm Joe Madden, I'm going Jake Arrieta Game 1.
I tend to agree with you. I think
most of the rotations, and a lot of even like Jesse Rogers and other Cubs insiders and Cubs reporters have their rotation penciled in as Hendricks, Arrieta. And, as good as Kyle Hendricks has been, which he's been very good this year, he's much better at home. I mean, I know the home and road split, so, the stats are closer to the same this year, where last year he was just dominant at home and then very good on the road. And also, last year, every start he made except for Game 7 of the World Series was at home.
Yeah.
I mean, he was very good in his 2 starts against the Dodgers. He was good until he got injured against the Giants in Game 2 of the NLDS. He was not at his best in Game 4 of the World Series. He put a lot of base runners on, ended up pitching 4 2/3 scoreless innings. And he did the same in Game 7 when he was probably yanked earlier than he should have been.
Right.
Except I just feel like Arrieta is the guy that has come up the most clutch in these big games lately. I mean, 2015, the National League wild card game, in the shutout against the Pirates. He pitched in Game 3 of the NLDS against the Cardinals to give them the 2-1 series lead. He won 2 games on the road in the World Series.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's getting overlooked. He won Game
2 and Game 6 on the road. I believe he was the first pitcher to win 2 road games, to get the win in 2 road games in the World Series.
I think you're right about that. And, I mean, he just completely dominated that.
One of the games he took a no-hitter into the 6th inning, I think. I think it was the second game he took a no-hit. One of the 2, he took a no-hitter and, pretty deep into the game.
So that just goes to show you. I mean, I think Arrieta, of course, if he's 100%, I think he, or if he's close to it, I think he should pitch that Game 1. I'm leaning towards Hendricks pitching Game 2 in Washington. That's my opinion. And then at Wrigley, I would have Lester start the first home game, and then Quintana pitch Game 4. That's what I would do.
Right. I mean, and it's tough because when you kind of factor in when you want certain guys to pitch, except in the NLDS, you just have to go, really the one that matters the most is the one who's going to be also pitching in Game 5, because they'll be facing Scherzer again, and I mean, I assume Scherzer will be going in Game 1 over Strasburg, and then the thing is, except another thing is, I feel really confident about the Cubs winning Game 2 if it's Arrieta versus Strasburg.
So do I. Strasburg, he's been up and down. He's been good when he's been healthy. He's been injury prone, and he seems to get rattled sometimes. And when Arrieta has a bad outing, he doesn't have a blow up inning like Lester would necessarily.
He does if he's walking guys.
Yeah, it depends on the walks. He has to have his command there. I would go Arrieta. And I mean, I don't have a problem with Hendricks pitching on the road in Washington, D.C. I don't have a problem with that at all, because we saw what he did in Game 7 of the World Series. He was pitching lights out, and then he gave up kind of a walk and then was pulled way too early, but besides that, I mean, he also dominated the Dodgers and outdueled Kershaw in Game 6 to go to the World Series. So I think, those two things are huge, and he has more experience than Quintana, which is why I would pitch him over Quintana in that position. And Lester's been struggling, so I would have Lester pitch at home where he can have the home crowd behind him.
Right, and that's a good point with Quintana. You probably don't want, if it can be helped, especially in this situation where he probably wouldn't be pitching one of the first 2 games. You want to get him his first postseason start at home.
Right.
Don't want him to get rattled early. And, I mean, the thing that makes this really tough is the fact that you're going to be facing Scherzer and Strasburg in Games 1 and 2. The rest of my rotation, I think I'd go the same. Go Arrieta, Hendricks, Lester, Quintana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just seems to make the most sense. And, of course, Joe Maddon said today nothing has been settled. They haven't decided what they're going to do yet. It'll probably be a collaboration between Joe and Theo. I mean, obviously Maddon will have the final say, but, it'll be a collaboration of what they want to do. And, as far as John Lackey is concerned, I think he'll be pitching out of the bullpen. We also heard last night during the celebration in the locker room, John Lester might have, said it too early, but it seems like this is going to be Lackey's last year playing baseball. It seems like he's going to retire after the year.
Yeah, I mean, his contract's up, and there's no way anyone's going to be giving him the kind of money that he's making this year.
No, absolutely not. So, he maybe spoke too soon, but it seems like Lackey, obviously wants to go out with another ring. That would be nice for all of us. But we'll see if he even feels like he should be pitching out of the bullpen. I mean, he's kind of he's kind of a tight-wound guy. He's the type of guy that would probably be upset about it maybe at first.
Yeah, he's got an ego.
So he'd probably be upset at first for first reaction of being asked to pitch in the bullpen. But I think he can do it, and they really could use the help. You don't know what you're getting from Justin Wilson. You definitely don't know what you're getting from Rondon if he even makes the roster. And so
he's going to.
I'm assuming he is. So there's a couple guys that are shaky there. So you need somebody like John Lackey who is a lot more reliable than those guys.
Another thing, like if Lackey's going to be upset, who does he think he should be in the rotation over? You didn't go and trade a lot of your farm system for Jose Quintana for him to not pitch in the playoffs.
He probably thinks they should have a 5-man rotation, and if it goes 5, he'd want to pitch Game 5 in Washington, which I would not trust. But that's probably his thinking. He'd be, well, let's just do a 5-man rotation like the regular season. Why not?
I hope he wouldn't think that. I mean, I know a lot of people. Most of the rotations predictions that I've seen have been going Hendricks, Arrieta.
Well, that's fine.
Lester. Yeah, right. I mean, and another thing is, it's going to be so tough to beat Scherzer.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough.
The goal is to win one game in Washington. That's definitely. I mean, that's the expectation, really, because you don't want to go down 0-2 in any series. So, especially in a best of 5. So, I think it's important to win one game, and it'll. If they do, it'll probably be the one that Scherzer doesn't pitch.
Right, and as I said a while ago, this is back when you might have assumed Lester would have been pitching that first game, and I said I feel confident that they can win the Arrieta versus Strasburg game.
Yes,
and now
I remember you saying that.
You don't know who's going to be pitching in that game now. It probably will be Arrieta or Hendricks.
I mean, it definitely should be. Hendricks, I mean, the numbers speak for himself. Ever since the injury, ever since he came back, he's been pretty dominant. He's been getting better and better with every start. Pitched an important game in Milwaukee, shut him down. So I think it's important. By the way, Milwaukee won today 4-3, so they're 2 back. The Rockies don't play today. So Milwaukee still has time. I honestly, and we'll talk about this a little later on, but I honestly would rather have them in a wild card spot than teams like Colorado or something, because I kind of like their team. I think they're kind of a cool team. They're kind of an underdog. It's kind of cool to root for the underdog. I know that they're kind of a rival of the Cubs, but they're not St. Louis. So
they're not St. Louis.
so you got that going for them. And I mean, it would be cool to see Colorado and Arizona, but I think it would be nice to see Milwaukee. We're going to take a short break. We'll come back. We'll continue talking about baseball. We'll talk about the Cubs and what to expect from the postseason. We'll talk about the NL wildcard race. The AL wildcard race is all wrapped up thanks to Nicky Delmonico on the White Sox. So we'll talk about that too. Coming up next on Sports Renegades on SportsTownChicago.com. The Sports Renegades podcast on SportsTownChicago.com.